The Faculty of Theology is hosting the only chair in Germany where it's done special research and teaching on Orthodoxy, and especially with this focus on Oriental Orthodoxy. There's no other chair in Germany anymore where this is done. And the tradition in Göttingen is a very long and old one. People like Paul de Lagarde and others were very famous here. And here was the first professor for Syriac church history, Werner Strothmann, after World War II, who initiated the concordance of the Bible. So the concordance of the Syriac Bible was done here in Göttingen, as a lot of editions as well. And in this time was my first strong contact with India, because Jacob Teke Parampil, the founder of the St. Ephraim's Ecumenical Research Institute in Kottayam, was an assistant together with me in the research group working here with Strothmann and Wiesner and all the other people in the Syriac field in the 70s. And that was the reason to establish the context to India. And in the same time, Joseph Varghese, who was very helpful to arrange the things here, was doing his studies in Göttingen for his PhD, but in the field, in a totally other field. Welcome to Your Grace, to the representatives of the Indian Orthodox Church. You see, the Catholicos who should be here is not with us. He got a call that a metropolitan very close to him is going to die, and he hoped that it can be done after his return on Wednesday, but it was not possible because the time left for the metropolitan is very short. So he decided to go back to India to be with the metropolitan, because the metropolitan said that he has to bring something to him and needs him as a personal assistant in that time. So that's the reason why he is not with us, but he, that I can really say he is really with us. He said that his thoughts and our place in his heart for Göttingen is there. So we have to accept that he is with his in a spiritual way with us, even if he is not in a physical way present. We had behind us the prayer, as you perhaps realized, in the Cathedral of Berlin for the Christians in the Near East. We had a conference on the future of the Christians in Near East. The patriarchs visited the president of the Federal Republic of Germany, and they had some meetings with people in the work of social work so that they can get some help for their countries. And one person is all the time now very helpful all the time for us in the EKD, and that is the referee for the Orthodox churches in the EKD, Martin Illert, who did a lot that these things can happen. And it's really a pleasure for all of us to work together with him. And he promised to say a word of greeting for this occasion. Martin Illert, please.
Thank you very much. Your Grace, honored fathers, dear brothers and sisters, I would just like, on behalf of the Protestant Church in Germany, of the Evangelical Church in Germany, I would just like to extend the greetings of our chairman and of our church to all of you. And it's great that you are getting together here so that we have also the academic level within the meeting of Eastern Oriental churches, because this is very important to us, that we cover different levels of our getting together. There was the inter-Orthodox level, when you could meet your brothers and sisters of the other churches. There was the ecumenical level, but there was also the social level, as mentioned, the political level, and of course the academic level. And even if Göttingen is the only place where there is a chair for Eastern Christian studies, of course there are other people also around who are doing that. And we would cordially like to invite you, your churches, just to strengthen our connections with the different places, with the different persons you met. As you may know, I'm also responsible for scholarships, and so this is an opportunity to bring together our churches, those people who want to spend research in Germany or who want to do exchange work or who want to learn languages are all very welcome to apply for that, and we are very grateful and thankful that you are here now, and we deeply hope that we will cooperate together in the future. Thank you very much, and all the best to you here in Göttingen and ever after. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ehlert. We should now listen to a second song of my group, and please come forward. Perhaps I should explain a little bit the actual background. I'm a member of the board of the St. Ephrem Ecumenical Research Institute, so I taught in India for now more than 20 years. For a long time I was there every year. 11 years I gave a Indian master program, a seminary, and Chennai in that case, but also in Kottayam. And we have a contract with the Orthodox seminary in Kottayam since nearly a decade. And we decided that we want to strengthen this because of this occasion for the future. Okay.
We're going to sing now the Our Father in Aramaic.
As you saw on the posters, His Holiness the Catholicos agreed to give a speech. This speech will be held now by the Metropolitan of the Indian Orthodox Church in New York, Metropolitan Nikolaus. So please come instead of the Catholicos to speak to us.
Thank you, Professor Hamke. Glory be to Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, one true God. Dear brothers and sisters, one advantage of accompanying His Holiness is that you don't have to do anything usually. You just be in the shadow. But unfortunately, the sudden illness of one of our metropolitans made His Holiness to cut short his trip and go back to India yesterday itself, so the responsibility falls on me. So if there is any mishaps in the delivery of the speech, it's my fault, not his. As we reflect on the Indian Church, Indian Orthodox Church itself, in the apocryphal text of Acts of St. Thomas, it says that it seems as if St. Thomas was punished by sending him to India by Christ, because the story says that he was trying to resist. I don't want to go to India, this faraway land. So that Lord Jesus had to sell him as a slave to a slave trader so that he will be forcefully taken to India. But when you look at the history of the Indian Church itself, it shows a special relevance why Jesus chose St. Thomas to go to India. Because when you read the resurrection stories, we always call him the doubting Thomas. But we also refer to him as the brave Thomas. Because while the disciples were cloistered inside a room because of fear of the Jews, this guy was walking around the streets of Jerusalem to see what is happening there. And when he came back, Jesus had already appeared and left. And the disciples shared the story to him, and he was refusing to believe that story. He said, no, I want to experience the risen Lord myself. I am not willing to take your witness. And when you reflect again to where he was sent, it has a special meaning, because India was the land of great rhetoricians, the great religions who could argue for years together without coming to any conclusion. So if Thomas had gone there and said that Peter and Philip and others told me that Jesus was resurrected, he would not have taken seriously. So it was a very precise reason why in the divine plan that he was the one who insisted on experiencing the Lord himself. And also, among the gospel narrative, we see in some place, only two places we see him talk. And the other place is, he says that let us follow him unto death, even to death. And after 2000 years, when you reflect, his willingness, our founder's willingness to follow Christ to death might be the reason why this happened to be the only church, only apostolic church that remains unpersecuted by any organized manner. So with this opening comments, I just want to read His Holiness' message to you. Greetings to the honorable members of the faculty of the University of Göttingen, research scholars, students, and the distinguished guests in the name of the Blessed Holy Trinity. At the outset, we would like to thank Professor Martin Tamke and his colleagues in organizing this August meeting. We consider this as a great honor to bestow to the St. Thomas Christians in India. We have a common term in use in our vernacular language to propose what we call the religious and cultural identity of St. Thomas Christians, which is Marthomayude Margam. This could be translated as the way of St. Thomas. The way, as we know, is synonymous to the nomenclature Christianity or Christian religion. The reference of Margam certainly dates back to the pre-medieval times. The Acts and the decrees of the Synod of Damberg of 1599 refer to the prevailing Christianity in the Malabar region of India as Marthomayude Margam. We would like to highlight a few aspects reflecting the religious and cultural identity of the Margam. Dialogue of life. In my primary school days, among the little children, we used to play a wonderful game. In my vernacular language, the game was named as Indisch-Orthoxen, which literally means the little children's game of preparing rice. This is played out over the summer vacation. All the children in the neighborhood will gather together under a tree. The group will be counted as one family. A father and mother will be selected among them. The rest of the children will be considered as the little ones of the family. Every single child will bring his or her little share of different raw foods and whatever household utensils they could. Under the leadership of the selected father and mother of the family, gruel and little side dishes will be prepared, and finally, when everything is ready, all of us will sit down under the tree and share the food, as we are one big family. This game has contributed a lot to the happiness of our innocent childhood. I grew up in a village where we have people of all the major religions of South India, and in our group we had children from all these religions. We never felt any difference between us. We were certainly aware that we were from different religions, yet we felt that we are one family. This dialogue of life is my humble foundation that I have received from my parents. My parents, who were born and brought up in the colonial India well before the Second World War, well rooted in the St. Thomas Christian tradition, did uphold this dialogue of life. We have been brought up in a culture where the preservation of identity was significant, but it was never meant to be a tool in having hatred to people of another faith or tradition. It never became a destructive catalyst in dishonoring the dialogue of life. Alongside of this, my mother, who is my first spiritual guide in my life, like any of us, taught me to read the Holy Bible. My mother was my first biblical interpreter. She used to present the gospel events as if they were happening in our lifetime. I would like to recollect one of the gospel stories on how she taught me. It was the story of the centurion whose servant was healed by our Lord. She read the testimony of the Jewish elders of the neighborhood as, "He was worthy of having you do this for him, for he loves our people, and it is he who built our synagogue for us." And then she said, "We once had a Hindu ruler like this centurion who gave the St. Thomas Christians a Hindu temple to be converted to a church. And our forefathers consecrated and dedicated this temple as a church in the blessed name of the child martyr, Saint Kyriakos." Words are hardly enough to explain how powerfully this message of generosity and harmony got into my heart. Dear friends, I am not here to idolize our past or to inflate our St. Thomas Christian identity. We certainly have our own flip sides as well. But I would like to spread the good news of peace and harmony our St. Thomas tradition has instilled in us. Truth sometimes hurts, but time has its own good techniques of healing. Before the colonial times, the St. Thomas Christians were one single community. After the 16th century, we had fractional multiplications. Now St. Thomas Christians are spread across, at least in 7 denominations. We have denominations covering the Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant traditions. Thank God, after long centuries of division, in the 1980s, we started building up a common platform shared by all the denominations of the St. Thomas traditions. At Nellakal, a place where St. Thomas the Apostle is believed to have founded a church, the churches together founded a church, which is a common place of worship for all the denominations. This is a symbol and common witness of the unity of St. Thomas Christians in India. So far, we are not aware of a common worshipping place in the world except for Nellakal, where the Protestants, Orthodox, and Catholic traditions share the same place of worship. We believe that this dialogue of life in itself speaks on the dynamism of the religiosity and the culture of St. Thomas Christians. It will be easier for me to reflect on the cultural and interreligious interactions of St. Thomas Christians based on something physically possessed in our treasury from the past. We are referring to the Theresapalli Chepped, otherwise referred to as Theresapalli copper plates. These are copper plate grants issued by King of Ceylon called Ayyanadigal Thiruvadigal in the Common Era 849 to the St. Thomas Christians of the Malabar coast. This refers to the gift of a plot of land and an array of privileges and rights given to the St. Thomas Christians. As early as 1800s, the scholarly world has shown interest in this prime possession. In the first decade of 1800s, Claudius Buchanan, the Church Missionary of the Church Missionary Society, made a copy of these plates to hand it over the Cambridge University, and thereafter several serious studies have been made over these plates. Thanks to Dr. Elizabeth Lambourne, the reader of the De Montfort University, Leicester, UK, who in the recent years has initiated an intense research on the maritime history and the commercial networks in the Indian Ocean and the southern coast of India. This research initiative has brought an added interest in the scholarly studies of these copper plates. According to the transcription of Reverend Hermann Gundert, a German missionary, this has been issued by the local ruler with the concurrence of the King of Travancore. Again, according to him, the Anjuvanam and Manigramam, which were the Jewish and Christian dynasties, are being appointed joint protectors of the land and the church endowed. All the scholarly transcriptions and academic interpretations thereafter point towards the fact that the issuance of plates and reservation of the privileges show the cultural symbiosis of the St. Thomas Christians of the Malabar coast. Personally, I would like to highlight not on the privileges enjoyed by the St. Thomas Christians in the past centuries, but I would rather wish to emphasize on the interdependencies and inculturation of the community. It is a proven fact that before the colonial interventions, the nature of the St. Thomas Christians was more indigenized. This has been clearly attested by the acts and decrees of Synod of Diamber as well. As I have already mentioned, the preservation of the identity does not have the connotation of a judgmental attitude to any other parallel traditions. In order to refer to the quest for identity and freedom of St. Thomas Christians, again as head of the church, I would like to refer to another priceless document that our church is in possession of. In the Common Era 1806, one of our main parishes in the northern region published a pledge which is now referred to the Arthat Padiola. The content is something that came out of their bitter experience of subjugation from the Rome, which resulted in the division of St. Thomas Christians. This was signed by 12 lay leaders and the main priest of the parish to submit it to our predecessor, more Dionysius I. The document clearly refers to the agonies caused by the division by the intervention of the Roman Church. Further to this, a pledge is made on becoming cautious for the future or on any possible physical interventions from Rome, Babylon, or Antioch. The original of this is an inscription on thin brass plate, which is now kept in our treasury. As we all could agree, the ecclesiology of the Orthodox Church affirms the significance of national identity and autocephaly. These aspects are not contradictory to the possible common witness or the acknowledgements of the primacy of honors. Our forefathers valued their freedom, and in all Christian spirit we value it too, while wholeheartedly acknowledging the significance of fraternal relations. We should like to spell out a few acknowledgements on the mission of help received by the St. Thomas Christians. We have been hugely supported by the Anglican and the CMS missionaries. The linguistic and philological contributions of renowned German luminaries, of which I would like to specifically mention on the contributions of Arnos Padiri, Johann Ernst Angslodon, a Jesuit priest, and Dr. Hermann Gundert are substantial. Both of them have contributed to our language tremendously, of which St. Thomas Christians are huge beneficiaries. On a lighter note, it is Dr. Gundert who introduced the punctuation marks, especially full stop, in our language. We are sometimes in the habit of talking more, hence finding full stop sounds to be more symbolic for us. Again, interestingly, I wish to bring to your notice a gift one of our predecessors received in 1808. The gift in reference is a gold medal of a little less than 72 grams of gold given by Dr. Claudius Buchanan to our parish in Kundangulam. What fascinates me is the German inscription on it. I can't read it. Which reads in English as, "Thy baptism, O Lord Christ, is the prototype of our own baptism." It has been recorded in Dr. Buchanan's memoirs. The medal which I presented to them was that which Mrs. J gave me before I left Calcutta. It is about 3 times as large as a college gold medal and exhibits the baptism of Jesus in Jordan elegantly executed, and on the reverse a child brought to be baptized. I placed it on the altar in the presence of the people with due solemnity, and beside it a gift to the poor. In the translation of the Holy Bible to the vernacular Malayalam, the CMS missionaries were of great support to the local translators. The St. Thomas Christians have been supported well by the rulers of the land in the past. We have never faced any organized persecution from the rulers of our nations. Having said this, we take this opportunity to express our heartfelt prayers and our solidarity with the persecuted churches in the present time. We as a church are in constant touch with the Coptic and Syriac Orthodox patriarchs in expressing our church's prayerful support. We do pray and hope that peace will prevail in the affected regions and that terrorism will come to an end. We take this occasion in profusely thanking our host, Professor Martin Tamke, and his team. From our professors and teachers who visit Göttingen, we have heard a lot about Professor Tamke and his students. Your interest in Oriental and intercultural theologies has become beneficial to several particular traditions in knowing themselves. It will not be an exaggeration if I say that our students have been benefited much by the visits of your research scholars to India. Our doors are always open to you. We would be most glad to welcome you and your students to our church and our institutions for cooperative study and research programs. May the love, grace, and communion of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, one true God, be with you all, now and forever and ever. Amen. Thank you.
Your Grace, thank you very much for presenting the speech of His Holiness with the introduction you gave yourself. Just to explain who is with us, because I did not do it in the beginning, with His Grace from New York, he explained us in Berlin how this is to be a church in diaspora, how you try, how much you need the language of your country in Malayalam, but on the other side, you need to be a church in America. So you have to encourage the people to know English, because otherwise you have no possibility to influence society or to have interaction or even to get members of the American society into the Indian Orthodox Church in North America. That was a wonderful speech you gave there. And so you see Indian Orthodox Church, as all the Oriental Orthodox churches, is not just a church in the country. It's today a worldwide church. Wherever you are going on this earth, you will find Syrian Orthodox, Ethiopian Orthodox, Coptic Orthodox, but also, and sometimes overseen, but not for today, Indian Orthodox. The migration from Kerala, South India, to the world is enormous, and it helps also the people in Kerala, because diaspora helps the people who are still in Kerala to develop their villages and towns in the right way. The other person I had already last year as a guest professor in my institute, and it's a long way of friendship between us. I remember when I was teaching one lecture in the course of Orthodoxy at Bosse, when George Condotra was teaching Orthodoxy in Bosse in Geneva. After he was working in that way for the World Council of Churches, he went back to India, became principal of the Orthodox Seminary in Göttingen. Now he has a chair, as a man with more than 70 years, a chair at the Mahatma Gandhi University in Göttingen that is specially devoted to Mar Gregorius, because he is still the leading ecumenical figure, not just for your church, but also worldwide. When you look to the development of ecumenics and the World Council of Churches of the last century, you can't overlook this person in history of the World Council of Churches. Yes, this is really a way of friendship we have together for a long time. I remember one time when I was in the Orthodox seminary, they had a cut of electricity, so there was no electricity. What they did, all the room was full of candles, and they were singing, and through the dark, by the candles, we went into the hall. That was a very impressive moment for me. Thank you very much to be with us again. And we have two representatives of the ecumenical department of the Indian Orthodox Church. When my students are going to India, and I bring a lot of my students to India, more than 20 now were in the last years in India, mainly to learn Syriac, but also to do other things in research. There was always the question, who is willing to speak with my people to help them for the research? And so in the ecumenical department, for an example, if you allow, I start with Father Abraham. Father Abraham did it to be something like a dialogue partner or a guide into the field for my PhDs. And on the other side, we have also an inner Orthodox dialogue. It's a long story of inner Orthodox dialogue up to the agreed statement in Chambéry, but it's a longer story. And there you have someone who really is not just in the Indian and Oriental Orthodox context, but he lived also on Mount Athos, as well as he is an icon painter. So you see, you have a big variety of approaches to how to be an Indian Orthodox in our present days. 4 very different approaches for the same church, and that shows already something about the actual life of Oriental Orthodoxy today. So thank you very much for being here with us. And the last one I introduced already in the beginning, Joseph Verghese, Professor Joseph Verghese, did something in Word. What? Pflanzenzüchtung. Okay, I would not be able to translate that into English. You heard that His Holiness gave a church for the service of all denominations in South India. In this way, you are more advanced than we are. We slowly go and have some institutions like that. We call it House of the Religions. For example, we have something like that in Hanover. But we don't have a church where all of us doing their services. This is perhaps a melody, a music of the future for Germany, but not for the present time, up to now. So you show us an example, and especially His Holiness in these actions shows us an example how to create an ecumenical spirit in a world of divisions. And your church is one of the churches that were leading in the questions of dialogue between Orthodoxy and Protestant churches. And when I was looking where are the forerunners for this thing, I devoted myself the last century, not centuries, so I'm not so old, the last decades, since the middle of the 1970s. There was one thing really moving. Only one dialogue is published. Only one dialogue of all the dialogues that were done between Oriental Orthodoxy and Protestant churches, and that was a dialogue in India. The dialogue that was run by Paulus Gregorius, the Metropolitan of Delhi and principal of the Orthodox Seminary, and one of his students was K.M. George, who later on brought this book into publication. So for us, when we try to go on with dialogue with Oriental Orthodoxy, it's good to know we are not the first one. So we have already somewhere a cornerstone, and you did it much better than we did it, because when you see we are nearly 40 years in dialogue, unofficial dialogue and consultations and so on with the Oriental Orthodoxy, we never published all our papers. So we have just 2 publications for all the decades. And I'm a little bit afraid that when people like me, as the old persons who are much more than 60 now, that the knowledge, even the knowledge about these springs of our interaction might be disappearing, and that your Catholicos do what he can do, that these things are not disappearing and not out of being in between our churches, is the reason why we decided to give him as the first person where we give the award for Losky to him. We want in this way to honor in our small institute persons who did in this field really contributions to ecumenism. And your Catholicos did a lot for this ecumenical understanding between our churches. To explain very short who was Losky, Nikolai Losky went to Göttingen to discuss with the people here his idea of intuitivism. So to have another approach to reality than by ratio. And he made a big religious philosophy out of this approach and became one of the leading religious philosophers first of the Russian Orthodox Church. And when he were in Göttingen, his son Vladimir was born. Most of the Orthodox people of the world know him as one of the leading Russian Orthodox theologians who who was then working as his father in Paris and New York in the Orthodox institutes of Saint-Serge and St. Vladimir's to develop Russian Orthodox theology outside of Russia, because in Russia it was not possible anymore. It was after the revolution 1917. And both were eyewitnesses of the persecution and of the Hinrichtung? Execution of the Metropolitan of St. Petersburg. So that was one of the moving points that Nikolai Losky decided to become a theologian, that he was not before. And then his way into theology started. So in this point, it's not the only point, we have a very strong connection between Orthodox people that had to flee because of difficult situations in their countries and develop Orthodox theology under the conditions of the West. That's the reason why we took this name for this medal, and I give it to you, Your Grace. Okay, that's better.
I received this medal on behalf of His Holiness in all humility, and we also want to thank Professor Damke and the department for honoring His Holiness indirectly. That means our church in this way. And in the history of the Malankara Church, our experience with other denominations were not always that great. We were a welcoming church. When the Portuguese first came, they were received with all fanfare. They took more than half of our people. And then later came the British missionaries. After a great period of help, we went into a theological dispute. It gave rise to different denominations. So for some time, we were in a xenophobic mode. But then after 1937, after the Faith and Order in Edinburgh, our church went into the other mode, into a friendly mode, and we have become one of the leading group among the Oriental Orthodox Church in the ecumenical movement, in spite of our smallness in the size. So this we consider as that a recognition for our church's involvement and a personal recognition of His Holiness. Thank you. Thank you.
We're now going to sing to you a hymn from the Coptic Orthodox tradition, but it's in Greek.
Stavrotis dimas eleison Agios Athanatos, O Anastas secton necron, que aneton eistus Uranus, eleison imas, doxa Patri Creio, que agio pneumati, que ninque ai, que istus eonas ton eonon, amin. Agia trias eleison imas.
I am sorry that I can't open up the floor for a discussion or conversation that was in our mind to do it, but you know the schedule in the faculty, the next group is already waiting for entering, so we have to close our session now. But something is left for you for the moment? Okay.
Dear professors, academicians, Your Grace, this is a shabby-looking two books here of published in 1960s, but is certainly referring to the very olden times. And I'm afraid I will be patronizing if I'm going to explain what it is about, especially on the long liturgical traditions of the past, especially in the West Syriac tradition. This is an exclusive collection that our church holds, which was being held for at least 300 years, but it was printed and published only in 1960s. This is the Pengitho, the order of services in West Syriac original for all the main feast. We are running short of copies of the original. We have only 2 copies left. This is 2 volumes, which is, I would like to invite Father Dr. George to hand this over to Professor Tamke. This humble gift from our side to you.
Professor, we have items and books for the students. So we just give it to you.
Or we do it in a moment then outside, or to my students too.
Oh yeah, only to your
Or
students.
we do it in the coffee.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the professor.
The last thing I want to do is for my church, this is the year of the Jubilee of the Reformation. And at any generation, we try to think about what this might be in our time. So we have a small word that express what we do there. It's Ecclesia Semper Reformanda. The church is an ongoing reformed body. My grandfather, wir sind gleich zu Ende. My grandfather was a professor, the grandfather of my wife was a professor in this faculty. He was one of the 3 founding fathers of the so-called dialectic theology. So after World War I, the grandfather of my wife, together with Karl Barth, who was starting his teaching in this faculty, and Rudolf Bultmann, who is also far away a member of my family in Marburg in this time at home, was thinking about how to call this way of theology. And they found in Dostoevsky their home and got this title, Dialectic Theology, that is now in a thesis written by Moltmann. Last year came it out. The discovery, the term dialectic theology came through Dostoevsky to the three founding fathers of dialectic theology. And the name of the grandfather of my wife is Friedrich Gogarten. And when you look into biography or into research that is done about the grandfather of my wife, you will find that his renewal of his way of doing theology came by his reading of Martin Luther. And so he did some books where he collected texts by Martin Luther. And he has this speciality that he tried to do books that were very important for him. It was a collection of preachings, sermons of Luther, and he tried to make it old in the way how it looks like. So it's Schweineleder. I have no idea. But in a very, very expensive and special way. And you can see that he handed down the book in the family. So whenever you find some the remarks are from my wife when she was young. And I thought the best way to give an expression of community between us is to hand over this book from my family to your church. Not because I want to be a missionary for Lutheran thinking, of course I want to explain this, but to give this treasure of my family tradition into your hands, because as you did it there, it's an exchange of things that are really very important for us. So, to whom I give it?